Good afternoon, students. Welcome to the interaction class for programming in C++. We have advanced quite a bit in terms of the course. I am sure you are enjoying the videos and you must be working hard on the assignments. So, as you know, this is an interaction class to answer some of the questions that some of you have sent to us through the question collection, and also couple of common questions that we have found on the forum. And during the course of this interaction also, you may send your questions, and the unique questions will certainly be answered. At least I will try to do that. Now, I would like to just point out once more is that please ask questions on specific problems or lack of understanding. Do not give general questions that I am not following what is inheritance or those kind, because those take a lot of time to discuss and is already well covered in the videos. Okay. So, with that, let us get started. Okay, well, so the first question is on inheritance. So, what are the applications of inheritance, virtual function, constructor, etc.? Miss Amruta, you have asked this question. See, this is exactly what I was saying, that this is a very generic question. Now, we have mentioned the different modules where each of these have been discussed in depth, and we have tried to explain why do you need to do that. And at a top level, if I want to say that what are the applications of these, the whole scheme of having the inheritance mechanism, which is the hierarchy of generalization to specialization of classes, which is very common in nature to happen, where you inherit everything from the parent, and you may want to change some of that behavior, and you are free to add more behavior. This is the general framework of inheritance. So, since this happens very frequently in nature, so the main application is to model all of these situations in terms of the C++ programming, and the mechanisms of specialization of classes, particularly the virtual functions. The dynamic polymorphism has been provided so that you can write more maintainable, more compact code whenever you have multiple such classes to traverse around. I will not take an example here. You will see that down the line in some of the other questions there are examples where I will refer to this question again, but grossly these modules have to be taken another look at. Okay, so here there is a question which asks that I am not able to understand the use of engineer star reports or manager star reports Prakhar. I presume that what you are trying to mean is why this field exists. Probably that is what you are meaning, because there could be two interpretations of this question. One is you do not understand why the field is there. That is the interpretation that I will try to explain. The other could have been that you do not understand what engineer star reports underscore square bracket 10 mean, which I would suppose is not the case, because you will know that when we say this, then reports becomes a data member which is an array of pointers to engineers and so on. So, if you find this in the class manager, so the idea is like this, that let us suppose that we have an organization which is hierarchical. Organizations are hierarchical. So, someone who is an engineer possibly reports to a manager. So, if you look from manager's point of view, so for every engineer there is a unique manager to whom the engineer is reporting. So, that's a unique link. So, which is what can come through the specialization and so on. But from the manager's perspective, the manager will have a number of reportees to manage, the engineers who report to that manager. So, this particular field reports is to maintain a list of such reportee engineers for whom the manager is responsible, and since this has to refer to a multiple number of objects and could actually the actual number could vary, we have modeled this by using pointers, because certainly you cannot have copies of those objects as a part of manager. So, you have a set of possible set of up to 10 engineer objects, pointers to engineer objects, which say these 10 engineer are under the reporting hierarchy of the manager. So, that is the kind of interpretation, and just to keep things simple, I have kept it as an array with a certain bound. So, it also interpretation wise it says that you can have maximum up to 10 engineers reporting to a manager. Similarly, director is just an extension of this same thought process, where up to 10 managers could report to the director. So, as you see on the as it goes on the class hierarchy from engineer specializing to manager, manager specializing to director, you have this structure in the natural organization, and you have that same thing created here through the hierarchy that we are showing here. So, that is the basic. So, this was Prakar's question. Then again on inheritance, the question is, how can I call private member function of a base class in derived class using get member function? I used super get function in a lot of different ways, etc. Now, the first point is that if the get member function is not provided, then you will have to find out ways of not having to use it, because you cannot just wish it and have it there. But what I guess is you probably know certain amount of Java, because you are saying super, because super is not a concept which exists in C++, it is something which is a concept which is in Java. So, I mean, please do not bring in the notions of Java model when you work on C++, because you will get extremely confused, because both of them support inheritance, both of them support hierarchies, they support I mean kind of dynamic polymorphism, but the modeling is substantially different between Java and C++. So, stick to whatever is specifically given. Then and if you have doubts, I am sure once the solution is released, there is explanations given, and you should find the explanation of how to solve this problem. Pointers, respected sir, you have described who you are, good. I want to learn both. Okay, lectures are all these are. Where is the question? I am very confused with the concept of pointers. Mridul Kumar Sharma, if you are confused with the concept of pointers, then you must go back and brush up your C, because the basic assumption of this course is the prerequisite is that you know C language and programming. So, pointer as it says that these are variables which store addresses of other variables. So, we can so we have given again quoted some examples, but if you are not clear and sound about pointers, going along the C++ programming would be extremely difficult. So, to clarify that, you please refer back to Carnegie-Rich's book or other books on C and clarify on your knowledge of pointers. It is about manually assigning an address of a variable to a pointer during either runtime or like implicit explicit type conversion. Okay. So, your question is whether you can actually take an address value and put that to a pointer. Yes, if you know the address value, you can do that. I would that is not something which is very, very typical or advisable, because the problem is if you put if you want to put a particular address value to a pointer, then that gets hard coded in your code, because so you compile the code one time and then you run the code multiple times. So, every time you run the code, the memory on which your variables are laid out, we say the memory allocation, will keep on changing. You do not know where it will be allocated. So, a particular variable or the address of a particular variable which you want to take in a pointer would vary from one execution to the other. So, if you have kind of hard coded a hexadecimal value in your code, then it is not likely that you will get that same address every time. So, I mean, to answer your question, the first part is, of course, if you look at the syntax and semantics of C++, whether this is allowed, yes, it is allowed, you can put. And for example, one very common example when you keep on doing this repeatedly is when you assign a null to a pointer. So, null is a fixed value, it is not value of any other address. So, you are saying that the address value is 0. So, that is a unique address and which is symbolized for not pointing to anything, but that is what you can. So, similarly you can assign other hexadecimal address values, but it is in a usual program it is not possible. Having said that, I must also sensitize you that there are certain domains, particularly in terms of IO interfaces, systems programs, where you want to access a particular device and that device is physically connected to your system through your CPU. So, by that physical connection it has a fixed address, and therefore, you may have to or may opt to use that physical address, which cannot change from one execution to the other, but there are certain additional tricks that the compiler has to do or you have to do in the program, so that to make sure that you know that address offline and can use that. And the risk of also doing that is a program compiled for one machine may not work for another machine, because the same device, say it is a printer or a keyboard or a mouse, may be connected to a different address in that machine. So, therefore, hard coded addresses are not a good idea at all if you are dealing with, as you are dealing with the pointers. Okay, Darshan Hirekurbar, you have a very interesting question. Will the base class assignment operator be inherited by the derived class? The answer is yes. Any thing that you do in the base class is inherited by the derived class. So, here we have given an example, and I will highlight a few points in this example. So, there is a base class here, and we have derived a class from the base class. Just to introduce you to the class, the base class has one data member DB, the derived class has another data member DD. So, derived class gets a DB from the base class, but as you can see that it is private. So, it will not be able to directly access that, though it will have a copy of this DB, and it has added another data member DD, which is also private here. So, given this, I have a constructor for the base class, I have a constructor for the derived class. So, to construct the derived class, since we cannot access the data member of the base class directly, we will certainly have to have an explicit call to the constructor, which is done in this. So, this is the context in which we are going to discuss your question. And then what we have is we have constructed two derived class objects, object 1 and object 2. We have provided for a print function in both of these, originally in the base class and then in the derived class, to print the data members of the object. Since derived class cannot access the data member DB of the base class, so to print the derived class print, we will have to call the base class print in turn. So, this is the framework. This is not the answer, but this is this is a context in which we are saying this. So, this part done. Now, we have a base class, a copy assignment operator in the base class. So, you can see this is the signature. You may have an const optionally here or not, that is a different question. So, this is a message to make sure that you have actually entered this. And then what I have done in the copy, I have, since I am writing the copy assignment, so I can choose any way that I would like to do that. So, I have done a kind of a little bit of a construed copy logic, which says that the DB field of the object obj that you are copying from will be taken, that is obj.db, and 5 will be added to it, and that is what the DB of the current object will get. So, when you assign, what will happen, that whatever the DB was there in in the source object will be incremented by 5 and be assigned. So, that we can see the change. So, this is my logic of this, and in derived class if you see, in the derived class if you see, you do not see that there is any copy assignment operator overloaded. So, in this context what will happen if I do this? Obj1 assigned Obj2. So, I would remind you that the meaning of this assignment is Obj1 dot operator assignment Obj2. In terms of the method call, this is what it means. Right. Now, the question is, what is this method operator assignment? Now, Obj1 is of the derived class type. So, naturally when it invokes a operator, it has to invoke a operator assignment in the derived class, but there is no such given in the derived class. So, what will happen? As you know that if a copy assignment operator is not provided, compiler will provide a default one which does bit copy. So, this will actually first invoke that copy assignment operator which is provided by the compiler, which simply does the blind copy. But then it finds that there in the base class the copy assignment operator has been already overloaded, has been given. So, what it will do? It will first invoke the copy assignment of the base class and then complete its own task. So, what it means that first the copy assignment of the base class will be done, which will actually do a copy of the DB member according to this logic, and then there will be a copy of the DD member which is exclusive to the derived class by the default copy of the compiler, which is just bit copy. So, naturally what will happen? I have created objects as 1, 2 and 3, 4. So, given that, naturally the print here will print these two objects, the fields DB, DD 1, 2, 1 and 3, 4. Then while this assignment is attempted, naturally the copy assignment of the base class gets invoked, and that is indicated by this message being printed. And then what will happen? The copy will first happen according to this for DB. So, you are copying from Obj2. So, you are copying from 3, 4. So, DB is 3, that will get incremented by 5 and it will become 8. In this will go, this 1 will now become 8. And then the control comes back to the operator assignment in the derived class, which is compiler provided, which just as a bit copy. So, it just copies. So, for the DD part, it will simply copy it to the DD part of Obj1. So, 1 gets replaced by 8 and 2 gets replaced by 4, and you get this new Obj1 as 8, 4 as you finally print, and you will get to see that. So, thank you Darshan for asking this question. This is a very interesting question, but certainly I had to go beyond what you have asked. I could have just said that it is yes, but I felt that you will need to understand this dynamics, because in this way the default copy assignment and the user provided copy assignment will interact in a complex way, and therefore, it is advised usually that if you are providing copy assignment operator, that is there is reason for making sure that it is something beyond the bit copy, then you should provide it along the hierarchy to just keep that logic very clean. So, it would have looked very clean if even if I do not want to do anything with DD, it would the logic would be far more clean if I provide an explicit copy assignment operator in the derived class as well, and just do that bit copy, do that copy of the DD, right. So, that is a main. Okay, I hope this is clear now. So, let me move on. This is a FAQ on forum, which means that we probably have got this question several times. describe the union statement in simple words. Again, you should brush up your C, because union is completely a concept of C, and you shouldn't be asking that here. You should already learn that up, but just to tell you that union is like a structure. In structure, we have multiple data members, right, and of different types, and we get a memory layout where all data members exist at the same time. In contrast, union is a structure like data type. It can be it can be built as a structure like unit, but the difference is, instead of having all the fields in one instance at the same time, it has only one field where you can. So, if you have, like in here, if you have two data members x and y, you cannot have both of them. So, if this were a structure, you will have something like this. This is if you have done struct, it is x, it is y, and as a union you have x or y. So, as a union, so you have only one field which can be either x or y or as many whatever you have. So, naturally it means that if there is only one field which can accommodate any one of the data members, then it has to be large enough to accommodate the largest data member. That is why in the size of a union is the maximum of the size of the data members. For example, here if we assume that size of int is 4 and size of double is 8. So, in a structure you will have the 4, 8 here. So, this whole thing will be 12. But in terms of union, the larger of the two is 8. So, this is 8. So, if you keep a y, if you keep a value of y in that way, then you are using the double. But if you keep a x, which is an integer, the x will be kept in one part and the remaining part will just be a garbage, it is not used. Right. So, the union is tricky in the way that the onus of deciding or remembering as to which field you have populated is very critical, and you will see in examples we have tried to highlight that if you have kept an int as x, then you must try to access a int from the data member. But if you keep an int and then try to access a double, access y, we will not have a compilation error, because you can access any of the data members, but at the runtime you will have a complete mess up of values and it will be very difficult to debug that. So, please make sure that when you use union in C++, if you have modeled right, if you are coding, understood the coding right, then in C++ you do not need to use union, strictly speaking. I mean, there are certain situations which are at a very advanced level, but usually you would not need to, because certainly if you have possibilities of multiple different types of data members, you can create that situation by multiple ways of creating specialization hierarchies and handling the same situation. But union is something powerful at the low level, but quite risky at the same time. So, here all that I described in terms of the size of a union data and what you can do with that is given through an example. Okay. I was unable to understand the function pointer program. So, I am unable to understand what you are unable to understand. If you ask questions which are so generic, then what do I explain to you? That's, you will have to understand that. Okay. So, what it is trying to do is in a very basic way, that if you look at, then the basic issue is I have three types of geometric objects: circle, rectangle and triangle, and you know that the way to draw them are different. So, I cannot have one function possibly which can draw all three of these shapes. So, I need to, the way to draw rectangle is different from the way to draw circle, that is different from the way to draw triangle, and so on. So, here we have not actually shown the code which can draw a circle or a rectangle or a triangle, but we have done a printf just to show, okay, they are different. So, that is all that we are trying to say. So, the point is, if I have a collection, if I am trying to work on a canvas program, say geometric canvas drawing program, or say civil engineering building drawing programs and so on, I will need a collection of all these different types of objects, and therefore, I have to put all of them into, I would like to put all of them into one bucket and be able to appropriately call any of the draw function depending on which particular object is there in the collection. So, if I have a collection, if my first object is a rectangle, I would like to call this function. If my second object is a circle, I would like to call this function. If my third object is another circle, then I would again like to call this function. So, that is the kind of scenario which is what we are trying to capture. And I mean, referring back to you, Amruta, this is one very great scenario where actually having inheritance model would really help. This is a C style solution. So, what do? You will have to remember what is the object type. You cannot just figure it out from the data that you have. So, you try to encapsulate all that in terms of a union. So, you say, okay, I can have either a structure for a circle which has the center and the radius, or I can have a rectangle which has the left top or right bottom corner coordinates x, y, and then the width and height, or I could have a triangle which has one vertex and base and height, and so on. The different ways of specifying them. So, but a particular geometric object would not be all of them at the same time. It will be any one of them, either a circle or a rectangle or a triangle. So, while each one is a structure, you finally make a union for all of them. So, say okay, it will either be a circle or a rectangle or a triangle, the union model that we were talking about. Now, the question certainly is that how do I know what it is? Given the data, how do I know it could be a? So, I add another field, I put another structure around that union, which has a field which I say is kind of the ID field, so that in every instance, if it is a circle, I will have a value CIR or 0. I mean, it has been made in enum type, so that it is more meaningful. So that I know if the CIR is 0, if the ID is 0, G code, the geometric object code is CIR or 0, I know it is a circle, and I should try to extract the data as if it is a structure CIR. But if the G code is rec, then I know it is a rectangle. So, the same union I will try to read as if it is a rectangle object, and that is a basic model. So, now I want to write a code by which I can simply call the draw function without actually having to know which particular type of object it is. So, I have shown that. So, that is where this array of function pointers come in. So, now what do I have? I have 3 functions, and I have 3 ID values that we have created. So, if I am given with one object, if that object is a circle which I can make out from here, I will need to call this function. So, if it is 0, if my G code is 0, this function should be called. If my G code is 1, that is rec, this function should be called, and if it is TRG or 2, this function should be called. So, for 0, one value, for 1 another value, for 2 another value, this is an ideal situation for doing an array. So, you do an array. Now, what should be the placeholders in this array? These functions. So, what is a function? In terms of a value, it is the function pointer or the address where the function starts. So, you put these functions which are the function pointers that you have. So, if I do draw ARR 0, then it will give me this address, which is the address of this function. So, if I call on draw ARR 0, suppose it is 0, and then make the call, then I am actually invoking this function. But if I call it with 1, then I am actually invoking this function. That is the basic method. So, that is direct table mapped indirection method for invoking a set of functions, and that is where the function pointers become very useful. So, here you can see finally in the main that we create a geo object as geo, and these 3 pieces of code are very explicit. In general, we will have several others and it will happen through an IO process, but this is just to illustrate that if you are for a circle object, then these are the fields that you will need to populate, because this is the structure. This, I mind you, this is a common field of the outer structure. So, that will always have to be populated with the type of the object, and the same thing is done in all these 3 cases. Now, then what you should look at is a last call. There is a beauty in the last call. You see that even though the specific code for setting the object type or different attributes of the structure are different, have to be different because they are different objects, but the actual call to the draw function now is exactly the same, but still it will call different function based on that. How will it work? Because it is using this array which has this geo.g code, that is the index that you can get from the enum 0, 1 or 2, and it takes that function pointer. So, if this is a CIR, the value is 0. So, the 0th function, which is draw CIR, will be called. So, this whole thing basically stands for draw CIR in the way I have arranged the function pointers in that array, and then you just call it with the parameter which is a geometric object. But in the second case, when this is rect and you know this is what a rectangle is, your geo.g code will be rect, which is 1. So, when I call this function, this actually is a draw rect function now, which takes that same geo object and calls this function, which will try to draw a rectangle according to the logic given. So, that is a great way to really make multiple different functions of related types work, and this is called that runtime dispatch of function calls, that depending on the object you dispatch the call. So, the whole thing is a beautiful solution with the function pointers, but it's, you can observe this is very tricky. You will have to manage the G code always yourself, you will have to do it very carefully. If you want to add another type, it is very difficult. For example, if I want to add an ellipse type, then the code everywhere I have to make changes here, I have to make changes here, all these will have to be edited. So, it is not only that I can have a draw ellipse function and add that and do this, I will need to make change here, I will need to make change here, I will need changes here and so on. So, across the whole program there will have to be changes if I want to bring in another new object type. Additions of new types of objects get very difficult. So, this is what is a typical C solution, but when we actually take it to C++, we will not write this code, we will write an inheritance hierarchy. So, we will possibly have something like geo object at the root, and we will have specialization saying this is a circle, this is a rectangle, this is a triangle, then we will say this is a this is a square, then I will probably say that this is a ellipse, and on this hierarchy I will do a polymorphic runtime dispatch using the virtual functions. So, the beauty of this whole thing is, given the hierarchy, if even as long as you keep on adding new child classes to this hierarchy and keep their functionality, nothing else in terms of the existing code need to be edited, changed, and it is very clean solution. You do not have to remember this G code at every stage where you deal with the object. So, that is kind of answering who asked the question? Okay, that's not recorded. It came in the forum. So, answering this function pointer program as well as Miss Amruta's question of how inheritance and virtual function really makes programming so very effective in C++ compared to C. Okay. Another fact which says the following code: how memory alignments occur, output printed. So, you will have to understand just one thing here is, since if you have 32 bits to represent an integer, they are organized in terms of bytes. So, it is basically 4 bytes. So, if you look at the 4 bytes of your numerical representation in binary, then naturally the 4 bytes will have to come in a certain order in the memory. So, there could be 2 ways that this ordering happens. This is what is precisely shown here. So, here you can see that well, I am sorry, here you can see that this is one order where you are going from low to high memory as you go from right to left, or it could be you go to low to high memory as you go from left to right. So, depends on the 4 units. So, they will have to come in a certain order. It could be right to left, it could be left to right. So, both these conventions have actually been, unfortunately, it never got standardized when machines were built. So, some CPUs follow the little endian strategy, others followed big endian strategy. So, there are both of these that exist in the literature, and this question keeps on repeating. It came in the last earlier live session also. So, it is just a fact that most of us probably are using Intel x86 CPU based machine. In that, it is a little endian way, but there are processors where the other. So, when you write the code, the basic point that I tried to highlight here is, when you write the code, do not assume that you know how the data is organized in the memory, because if you try to analyze based on that, or kind of write a code with those assumptions, it will work perfectly in your machine. It will work in other little endian machines also, but it will fail in a big endian machine, and the reverse is also true. So, that is so endianness is a nasty problem, and be careful in making sure that you never actually explicitly use the data representation in the memory in your code. In C++ it is possible to do, in C2 it is possible to do. You can actually know which data is where, but but do not get to that level in your programming, because you will cause yourself lot more pain than the solution that you provide. Let us move on. What is the difference between const and static keyword? I mean, that's okay. That's a very strong question. I do not really know how to answer this. That's kind of asking what is the difference between a camel and mango. If I ask you what is the difference between camel and mango, can you give a difference? No. They are completely 2 different things. Const is to provide the contract that the programmer or the designer of the program is telling the system, that says that okay, this is a constant value, it is a constant variable, this is a constant function. Constant function means it will not make changes to the object on which it is invoked, and so on. So, it is more a contract, and when by writing it you can change that, you can create partial undertones into it by using mutable, you have seen that, and you can override a contract in a certain context by doing constcast. In contrast, static keyword has several different use in C and C++. So, I mean, it could be static member in terms of a class, where it means that this is not instance specific, but the entire class has only one member for that. It could be static in terms of execution, like functions may have static local variables, it could be file static and so on. So, it means completely a different set of things, and depending on the context static, different meaning of static will have to be understood. It is unfortunate that this keyword static is so abused in C primarily, and therefore, it continued to be abused by C++, that the meaning of static keyword is extremely context dependent, whereas const means something very unique of a contract style and is very clear when it happens. I hope that answers your question. Otherwise, you refer to these lectures, there are more examples and clear discussions in that. Sir, what will happen when we try to access protected data members using the derived class object? In this, out this, all this, Nikhil, I do not understand what is outside main. I mean, please, when you ask the question, please think as to what are you asking. What is outside main? I mean, do you mean that you are referring to some code which is written in the global area, which is not a part of the function, part of any function, which is possible in C++, because you can have object definitions in the global area, and every object definition actually means two function calls, one for the constructor, one for the extractor. Did you mean that? Or you are meaning that outside main, you mean that functions other than main, which main eventually calls? That could be another interpretation. And inside main, I am assuming that within the body of main and so on. So, things are not to be looked at in so much of diversity. The point is, protected data members are, for everyone, protected data members are like private members, except the child classes of that class. So, protected data member is are those, or data member, or I mean, actually I should not write data members, it is protected members. Whether they are data members or they are methods, the protected is between private and public. So, if some member is protected, then for everyone, every function that is not a member function of this class, it is to be treated as a private closed thing. But for classes derived from this class, that is methods in that class, the child class which is derived from this class, for those methods it behaves like a public data member. So, it can be accessed. So, it is that very beautiful balancing between the two. Now, that of course answer all of the different cases you are talking of. So, again reminding that protected members are freely available to all member functions of child classes of the class, and they are not available to anyone other than that. Or for everyone else, it is the private member, and of course, protected members are available to the member functions of the same class. Can any tell me the difference between vector and using new operator in arrays? So, you are saying dynamically allocated arrays by new operator, Harish, and between vector. They are same, but they are very different. When vector is a particular templatized data type provided by the standard template library of C++. So, it is a matter of it is of course that vectors do not have a fixed size, and they are constructed at the runtime. So, to that extent they are dynamic in nature, and internally somewhat they do perform some dynamic allocation. Now, depending on the implementation, that could happen through new, that could happen through malloc and so on. But the basic fact is, a vector is a data type by itself written in the standard template library, and it has functionality which go beyond the array. So, if you look at arrays in C and the same in C++, it has a very limited functionality. I mean, functionalities a main functionality of an array is indexed access. You can give an index, and using that I can read or write at that index. That is if I think in terms of what are the methods, I mean conceptually what are the methods that an array type supports, it is the index access. In vector, that has been supported. So, you overload the index operator square bracket, by which you have been able to provide the read as well as write kind of indexing access for the vector type, that is done. But vector also has a number of other functionalities. For example, it has a constructor to which you can pass a size at the runtime, as to that means so many elements are required in that array. If you do not pass a size, it can actually give you an array or a vector of an default size. You can resize a vector, that is, you can at the runtime you can increase the size, decrease the size. It can, if you keep on adding elements to a vector repeatedly, then it can extend itself automatically. So, these are lot of other behavior that vector has, which makes it kind of a super type of array, but they are not, vector and array are that way not related, except for the fact that both of them do allow indexed operation. Now, if you ask me really for as a mature C++ programmer what you should be using, more often if it is particularly if you have your own data types to deal with, it is usually preferred that you use vectors because they are more flexible, they are highly optimized. And in the community, at times you will find notions like vectors are very inefficient compared to arrays. So, dynamically, of course, if you know the static time, if you know the static size, if it is fixed, you do not get into vector. You may not get into vector as such, but more often that is not the case. You will find in communities that comments that, well, arrays are more efficient than vectors and so on. Well, that is not exactly true anymore. It used to be in some early days of C++ standard library and C++ language, but now vectors are extremely efficient. The performance loss between using a dynamically allocated array and vector is extremely marginal, and the benefit that you get in terms of when it is a dynamically allocated array, the whole volume of management has to be done by you. In vector, it is just automatic, the code, and it is a proven code. So, well, use vectors, that is a bottom line. How to access a variable in a type def, if the type def is an array. Type def is just another name. So, it's just an alias. So, you are giving another name. So, beyond that you just you use it the way you would have used it if instead of type def you would have directly made that declaration. So, here Himadri has given a small nice example highlighting that as to what the type def array means, and what and then how it is used in terms of defining different variables like course name, instructor. They will these are just kind of rewriting system. Type def is not something significantly new. Semantics is just a short form of, particularly if your total type is very long, complex, particularly very useful in terms of function pointers. You have a function pointer, there is a return type, a whole lot of parameter types and so on. Very clumsy to write in the way. So, you write it only once, keep it there as a type def, which looks exactly like the function header itself, except that the name becomes now the name of a alias for this function pointer type, and then use it everywhere. More a convenience than really a semantic breakthrough in terms of the language. What will be the output error of the following program? This has been discussed here. It's a type def is a keyword. So, it's again the same thing. So, it's a, when we are writing this in the first line of main, type def int x, then x becomes the name alias for the type. So, it is an x stands for an array type which has two elements and is whose every element is of int type, and then that is being used in the next line. So, we say x is that array of two elements of int, and then you define the variable myArray having 3 of such arrays. So, it is 3 elements of arrays each, where each array has 2 elements in. So, that is completely equivalent to int myArray 32, and accordingly the computations are shown. You can refer to the release solution, and if you have Shaunaka Shubhangi Paliwal, you may refer to this later on. We move on to other questions. Hello, we would be thankful if helping me understand the basics of C++ migration, how the course is almost complete. Okay, what you do next? I mean, don't jump into the next level of the language. It's a very big jump, and from C++ that we have discussed in this course, the first level, which is primarily C++ 03, to C++ 11 is a big jump, and if you immediately try to jump, you might just fall through the crack, where neither you will be able to use C++ 11 effectively, nor you will be able to be good programmer in C++ 03. My advice would be that do a lot of practice first, maybe for quite a substantial period of time. Try writing code, and more importantly, try to read a lot of code from good projects. You have several good projects in the community, so that you get very comfortable with all different nuances of C++, particularly the inheritance, the overloading, the dynamic type handling, the polymorphism, in templates, which is compile time polymorphism in terms of exceptions. So get confident in those, and then you should take the steps to learn C++ 11. There is a big jump. It introduces a whole lot of new concepts and the syntax for that, and eases out quite a few things compared to C++ 03, but it also brings in a lot of pitfalls that if you have not learned well, you'll have difficulties, and again you'll have to write and read and write a lot. Regarding the later versions to C++ 14 and C++ 17, etc., don't jump too fast. I would advise that right now, given the maturity and usage depth of these languages, it is good to stick to C++ 11 for a while, and 14, 17, 21, all these, let them stabilize some bit more. Yes, we are discussing about floating a separate course on advanced C++, and NPTEL is making an assessment if such a course is floated, then whether it will at all have audience, because the prerequisite of doing that course would be maturity in C++ 03 programming. Possibly it will be a 4 weeks course. That's the current thinking, and if it is decided to be floated, then you can hope to see it possibly next semester, but I do not know. Decisions are yet to be made. The question was from Chandrahas. Which textbooks should I refer for C++? Shivali, my recommendation is always that you follow Strausstrup, but then in the course description, in the course basic course page, a couple of books are mentioned, so you can use any of them. But do not just pick up a book around the corner, because there are a number of books in C++ and many of them have too many errors. So, stick to the books that we have recommended on the course page. And for C programming, Kernighan Ritchie or others, you can look at, for C programming, you can look at books recommended by Programming in C NPTEL course as well. I have to choose our sessions in the non-proctored exam on 22nd. That's your choice, Shubhro. We cannot help you decide which one you choose. You can actually choose both, choose to sit in both, but best out of the two will be taken. And check for the announcement for more details. Online unproctored test will be conducted on September 22nd. It is a programming assignment. That is why it's a programming test. If it had been MCQ, then it is part of the main examination, Vipul Atharva. Regarding the hall ticket of final examination, I have no clue. I have paid the exam fees. Please ask NPTEL why is the submission date is in same. Decided by the NPTEL. Again, we don't control. How can I cancel exam registration and get the refund back? Utkarsh, this is not possible once registered. This is, but it will be good if you write to me directly and let me know why do you want to cancel it. So, what is the part where we have failed your expectation, because if you had paid for the examination, then I am sure you were serious to a certain extent, and then something must have gone wrong, so that you now do not want to take the certification. Please let me know. We will try to improve on that. Request you to please extend registration dates. Not in our control, is centrally decided. Hello sir, I want to ask about how final assignment score will be calculated. There will be there is specific announcements regarding the marks distribution. Slide becomes blurred. That is because we are alum. Slide becomes blurred because your bandwidth is less. So, choose possibly a lower resolution, lower quality video. The slides will not look as nice, but they will not be blurred when you go online. Unable to find any mentor for my programming course studying in this. My college is part of Swayam. The Himadri has given you what should be done. Where can I find the manuals for different libraries that you are using? Is there a manual page? Just like Python, yes, there are very detailed manual. I'm sorry, we forgot to put this. So there's a C++ reference site which has very detailed manual on each one of these. I'll request Himadri to put that on the forum. But yes, there's very standardized manuals for each and every library component, each and every type in that, each and every data member, and how to use the method with examples, with syntax details. There's a very detailed manual. So you just rely on those and go ahead programming. Can you please tell me the exam pattern of the main examination for the courses like C programming and that has been given. This is a proctored. This is for C++. Mind you, we are not the C programming course, so it is not good to ask that question or take this answer from here, but ask the respective teacher. For C++, this is what we will be doing. Many of the NPTEL courses provide the students with an internship at the corresponding IIT if they are topper or do well in the examination. Vinjay, let us hope that you get to that bracket. I mean, I'll wish you all the good luck. I mean, certainly you need to be an absolutely top performer to get considered, and then there is a process that NPTEL follows to bring forward those requests of interested interns to us. I can tell you at least last summer we had 3 NPTEL interns who worked with me. That I'm sure there will be a lot more with other professors for other courses. So, but the selection and decisions are made by the secretariat if you have the performance to support. That brings us to the end of this session. If there are some other questions that have come online, I will try to answer. So this is a question that have come through the time we were discussing. Sir, can you please explain shallow copy? I doesn't understand it in the week based video. Shallow copy is something very simple. I'll just so let's say you have an object which layout is like this. Suppose let me writing out is difficult. Say class A, and you have int x, you have int star p. So you have like this. So what will happen when you have instantiate an object? So you have a x here and you have a y here. So x may be having a value 5, and this is a pointer, so it points to somewhere maybe, and this location would probably be a dynamically allocated location, right, because it does not exist in the static declaration. Now the question is, if I copy, then if I just copy the object, what will I get? I will get 5. This is copied from here, and whatever is the address here will get copied here. So what will mean that once I copy this object, it will get me to a situation like this. So this is object 1, this is object 2, which is a copy of object 1. They have different x, because that could be copied, and in terms of y, the address has got copied. So, what means that the pointed object is common between them. When a copy works in this way, we say it is a shallow copy. So, this is a shallow copy. Instead, if I do a deep copy as O3, then again I will copy x, which is 5. Instead of copying this address, I will create another new object like this, another new int, put its address here for y, and put this value, copy this value in the newly created one. So, now between O1 and O3, I have two completely different copies. So, in the this is known as deep copy. So, in terms of shallow copy, if I change star y, which is this one, this object, if I change star y from O1, O2 will also see star y to have changed. If I make this 11, O2 will also see that star y has become 11, because it is a shared one. But in this case, if I have done a deep copy, then if I change star y here, this will change, this will not change. This will look 11, but this will continue to look 10. So, that is the basic difference between deep copy and shallow copy. We will include in this, we will include a slide later on to explain, so that you can follow it again. Sir, I can't understand the encapsulation in C++. Shatorupa, you are not studying and following the videos. I am sorry. Encapsulation is the first thing. The whole issue of private public access is the requirement of the encapsulation. So, we said that data is encapsulated, which means that you said that the data is put as private members, so that no one else from outside the class can use it. That is the encapsulation. That is, you are putting a shield, a guard around the data, and you are kind of putting the data in a capsule, and that is why you say it is encapsulation. That is it. So, by default, you will see that if you write data members in the class, then by default it means private. That means that they are all encapsulated. You have to go ahead and explicitly say that no, this is what I want in public, then you get that as public. This is a fundamental concept. Now, it extends for member functions as well. So, you put member functions without any specifier or as private specifier are encapsulated, can be used only by that class. Other member functions can be used by anyone, right. So, that is the basic idea. Please go through that part of the videos. I will request Himadri to put the module, refer to the module number where this is discussed. But what is the behavior of the following code? Now, how do I show you the following code? Let me try to write it. What Himadri, could you just it is int a initialized 100, then you have int star b, then I have cout ampersand a, then I have cin, int ampersand b, then star b equal to assign 10, cout a. Well, what are you trying to do? You have taken this, so this prints the address of a, that is fine. Cin int ampersand b, what do you mean by that? This is, I do not think this is valid, because when you say int ampersand, you are meaning a reference to integer, whereas b, so that needs a variable of int type, only then you can set a reference to that. but B here is a point at 2. So, I do not understand what is being meant here. I mean this part I do not understand the motivation, and I really doubt whether it is a valid C++. This part is fine, but doing a star B without a dynamic allocation means that B, you have only declared B, but you have not allocated a memory. So, there is B actually does not point to a memory. So, that is possibly what you are trying to set from here. So, you are trying to set that I will give that address from input. I mean atrocious, I mean please do not try that. I mean I do not think this syntax works, but even if you can make it work, this is not something, because you just do not know what address will you give in the input, right. So, this code will not work. I mean if you have some context as to where did you get this code from, if you have created it yourself, then please stay corrected that such code should not be written. But if you have got it from somewhere, then please with that context write in the forum or write to us. So, we will try to take a deeper look. Otherwise, this is not very meaningful. Anything else, Himadri? No. Okay, we have overshot time by 7 minutes. I'm sorry, there were just too many things to discuss. So, I think we have been able to clarify at least some of the issues that have been coming up. Please again understand that C++ is a complex language. Its use is quite complex, and you should repeatedly go through the videos and try to do the assignments, and beyond that keep on doing programming to the extent that you keep on doing practice that you can. And if you have specific questions, put that up in the forum. Please try to understand that if there are notions that are referred, they are all explained in the videos. If you are asking questions on them, it means that you have not actually gone through the video carefully. Go through them a couple of times, and in terms of the assignments, every assignment solution is now given with explanations. So, that should show you how to solve the problem effectively. So, make the best use of that. I wish you all the very best for your subsequent assignments, as well as if you are taking the examination, the proctored and unproctored part as well. Thank you very much for your time.